Kia ora, everyone. Kia ora, everyone. A very good afternoon to those who are in New Zealand, and maybe we have some people joining from Australia. So good morning, wherever you are. A very welcome to our June webinar organized by Flans. I'm Kunui, one of the exec member looking after the webinar portfolio. So today we are very pleased to have Lucy and Rachel with us. The exciting topic talking about virtual schooling in New Zealand, which could be a trend from now on. Looking forward to the session. This session will be recorded, so if you're not comfortable to be recorded, you may turn your camera off and then you may use the chat function. So we will monitor the chat throughout the session, ask any questions, comments, suggestions, or anything, and then I'm sure Lucy and Rachel will try to address them throughout the session. So without further ado, let's welcome Lucy and Rachel. Over to you, Lucy.
Kia ora koutou. I'd like to begin with the karakia. Tū taua mai runga, tū taua mai raro, tū taua mai roto, tū taua mai waho. Kia tō ai te moritu, te mori ora ki te katoa, humie, uye, tai kia. Warm welcome to the session about Ko Te Ako. Kia ora koutou, no te whanganui tāra ho, kei te noho o te Hamaki Makaurau, o Lucy Lindsay ho. Mahia ho, e Ko Te Ako, the alien Aotearoa. So I'm Lucy. I'm calling in today from Auckland. I'm the Deputy Principal and e-learning lead at the Ko Te Ako Primary School. Well, it's a Ko Te Ako Virtual Learning Network, Aotearoa, and I'm in the primary school branch of it. And my other main activity in the past few years has been I recently completed my studies at University of Sydney. And this other photo shows me graduating last year with my son and daughter. And I completed a PhD in education on design for online professional learning.
Kia ora, Lucy. Ko Taranaki te maunga. So I'm from Taranaki, but I'm based in the Eastern Bay of Plenty at the moment. Here are the most important people in my life, and this is why I'm in education for my children and my children's children. So my first foray into online learning was when I went to Massey and was part of their first online teaching degree from Massey. And when this little woko in the bottom right-hand corner, her mother was the same age, I was having my interview with Bill Anderson, and some of you will remember him as a life member of Flans, to go to Teachers College, and was really privileged to be able to do that in the online space. And for that, for me, has been the instigation for everything that I do with online for our learners and making access available. So I went on from there to work with the ICT PD network with Central Taranaki schools, right out to the very small eastern schools of Taranaki, out to Wangamamana, where incidentally, these little two on the right-hand side live now. I then went on to work with the Taranet video conferencing cluster as their e-principal, and showing how intergenerational we are. I took over this role from my mother, who was e-principal before me in the early 2000s. I then went on to work with primary schools led by my husband, Rick. When he was on the Chatham Islands, he started doing a lot of this work back to New Zealand, and I came in to support him, and from there began the VLN Primary, of which I've spent more than a decade working with. So my role is e-principal, and I've been leading in this space for a little while. So in today's session, we're going to give you a bit of an overview about, what's happening in the educational system in this space, a bit of background on the history, we'll drill down into how Ko Te Ako VLN works, and how and what our young people are learning, and look at how we're working with teachers in this online space. So, ko wai au, ko wai tātou, who are we and what do we do? So we are a nationwide based network, and we facilitate facilitate collaboration and provision of online programs across our schools. So we're working year 0, and we do have year 0s at times, to year 13s across many schools around the country. Our big why is really making learners' lives better and about creating equity of access to learning for our students wherever they are, and to make that a really good, high-quality learning provision. So we have only recently become Kotuiako. I mentioned before that I was the Veerling Primary E-Principal. Now I'm leading the primary section of Kotuiako Virtual Learning Network. And we formed that together with OLC, Online Learning Community. I'll give you a little bit more background in a minute about that. So it's all about sharing our expertise, resources, classes, in reciprocal ways across a network of schools, where we can share subjects where teachers have got a high level of expertise and they can share that across the network. And we do that through the direct provision of teachers or the sharing of resources that enables us to bring new teachers and across our network. We have a charitable trust. We're not actually a school. There is no provisions for us to be a school. And it's really embedded in the schooling system, where it's led from the schools are members, the schools are trustees. The ministry have given us all sorts of support in different ways over the years. The support they've given in primary, when we were Veerling Primary, has really enabled us to grow and to support many of our small rural schools. And from the secondary point of view, the schools contribute to the operations, so they're able to pull in a lot more of their resources than primary. And an indication of the scale of where we are at the moment is last year we had over 2,000, well, I've got on my notes here, 2,350 registrations. Some of them were individual students taking more than one program. We had 129 schools in 2023. And I know FLANZ has been working with Dr. Michael Barber, and we've been contributing to that State of the Nation type report that we hope to see very soon. And thanks to the FLANZ for supporting that, so we can get a really good picture of what that looks like across the sector, not just in our organisation. So here's a very early look at how things were working back then. It's not something new and innovative since COVID. In fact, in 2019, we got together in Christchurch and celebrated 25 years of virtual learning in Aotearoa. From its very early days, supported by Carol Moffat and Derek, you all know from FLANZ as well. They began working with Canterbury secondary schools and area schools and formed Casatech, and working alongside the correspondence school. And since that time, and particularly with Rural Broadband, Project Probe in the early 2000s, we had this proliferation of regional clusters springing up around the country. Also on that map, there's a lot of little green dots that haven't been identified, and that often gets missed, is that the Kaupapa Ara Whakawhiti Mātauranga Māori networks were big at that time too, and they were also early pioneers in the area, with significant investment in rolling out broadband through that area. And it was East Coast schools and Māori boarding schools working together in their virtual learning network. And if you're interested in it, in what work was done there, Pauline Whitey wrote a report in 2005, and you can find it on the NZCR website. So early 2000s, we were all popping up. We all had better internet. It was still pretty expensive. The ministry supported us by funding the bridge. It was like $10,000 a month. It was a lot of money back then. Internet connection for our secondary schools was almost $1,000 a month. Again, a lot of money back then. And the communities came on board with funding for the equipment that we used. So these were all factors in enabling us to get started and to start teaching and learning online and looking for some real benefits for our students. And over the years, all the clusters that you see on the left-hand side have merged into new entities. So the clusters in the north, mainly in the north, merged into what became OLC, which now is called Te Ako, and NetNZ mainly in the south. And VLN Primary has always worked across the country and not in regional based initiatives. And that's a little bit of a background onto how these organisations sort of sprung up around the country and what were some of the things that sat behind it. So some of the key drivers, and actually this goes back to a presentation Derek made yonks and yonks ago, because the data I have from him were that in that time, 110 out of 350 of our secondary schools had a roll of less than 120 students at year 11 plus. So our small schools were getting smaller, kids were getting on the bus and going out of town. There are a lot of kids on correspondence, changes to the curriculum and NCEA, and really difficult to get specialist teachers to where they were needed around the country. And at that time, the emerging technologies, which I talked about before, were just coming in as well. So that enabled a lot of activity. So schools were really beginning to see the potential of what they could do if they networked and did their learning together. And examples of that that Karen Moffat was involved in those early days was the Oxford area schools, where not only did they prove what was happening in their school, but they turned a whole community around and stopped that flow of young people from leaving the town. So those were key drivers in the early days, and honestly, nothing much has changed in our small rural schools. And actually in some of our urban schools, access to specialist teachers, changes to the curriculum, which we've been thrown back into, they're all continue to be drivers. So what did it look like? Here's some examples. In the very early days, we used telephone, audio graphics tablet there, and a computer monitor. We then moved on with Project Probe into using these massive big TV screens and Polycom connections. And again, that was really expensive. It cost something around $100,000 a school in Taranaki anyway, to be completely set up with the space, with the equipment, with the training, with the costs to have that running. But it was high stakes things for our schools to be involved, and the community trusts all got behind it and supported it. So in some ways, it was always a secondary thing to start with, because primaries couldn't afford that scale and that ability to access the technology. So come the late 2000s, we were starting to work from the desktop, and Ministry provided us with an audio conference bridge. So you can see on the bottom right corner, these are students from Rakiura Stewart Island, and they're on an audio conference bridge, and they're using Adobe Connect. They were all things that were supported for us by the Ministry. We'd got into the second rollout of RBI and the beginnings of Network for Learning. So again, the internet had to step up and enable us to do this learning in this way. So that gives you an idea of the journey we've been on so far. You can see where we are now. You know, we're in Zoom and we're using all sorts of things, and Lucy's going to dig a little bit deeper into what that looks like for our learners now. So I'll pass on over to Lucy.
In terms of how it works, like many people who were already working in the online learning designing space, we contrast our planned designed learning with what occurred during lockdown and people called emergency response teaching. So in contrast to ERT, our learning's got these three components. Firstly, it is planned and prepared by our subject specialist teachers. They're all registered teachers. Secondly, it's taught, and we're teaching it using online tools that support interaction and collaboration, and we're designing our classes and structuring them to do that. So it's very much not something sort of stand and deliver, and sometimes people will be missing it and they're like, you know, hey, can you record it? And it's like, well, yes, but actually not always. Sometimes we'll record a little bit of the instruction, but so much of it is people interacting, and it's fairly dynamic at the time and responsive to the particular student needs of that particular class. And the final thing that we do is we assign independent learning afterwards. So our taught classes, 30 minutes for primary, an hour for secondary. And then as well as that, schools set aside time for the independent learning. And so again, it's another 30 minutes for primary, which they can schedule flexibly. And that's things like reinforcing the sort of learning that you've done, finishing off stuff, practicing things. And it's supported by resources that we put into various learning management systems. We've got several that we use, and I'll talk about in a moment. And the secondaries have more. They have a number of hours of secondary independent learning that they're doing in there. And as well as that, the students are able to email the teacher and get other support in between if they need. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say then is, so we regularly report to the schools about the learning objectives and, you know, assessment against the curriculum. So we have two main online class options. The one that all of the secondary students are using, and quite a few of the primary, is this mixed groups where you've got students, maybe one or two from a number of different schools, joining together in one class with the teacher. But we also in primary run another model where sometimes we run a whole class, and for that it will be the classroom teacher involved as well, which provides a professional learning opportunity for them. They get to sort of see how the online learning is working, and it might be a chance for them to upskill in that particular area. And this is particularly popular, and as you can see, it goes even down to quite young age levels. So we will have sometimes a whole school in the kapahaka class or various other language classes. And we do a few other bits and pieces in a whole class in our primary sector. So these are some of our kind of favourite online tools at the moment. We are doing our classes with Zoom. We're using Google Slides, Forms, Drive, Docs and spreadsheets. For the independent learning, we tend to be using Google Classroom or Seesaw. Lots of our organising happens by Gmail and Google Calendar, but that's for the primary branch. The secondaries are also using a student management system. And then we have all this other software, not the entire range of what we use, but various things that we find useful. So quite a lot of people will be using Padlet, Quizlet. Some of the specialist subjects will use things like Scratch or Soundtrap, I think it's under my. And the thing, as you know, I mean, EdTech is always changing. So we regard them as a fairly dynamic space. We're regularly reviewing it. We, you know, and also because the capabilities are changing. So we have this ongoing need to continue to explore the options and upskill our teachers and just to adapt what we're using. It's an ongoing process. And the other super important thing, of course, is learner support. You know, as things like Professor Salmon's 5-stage model show, the very first thing is the access. And so we begin all the connections for our learners with introduction sessions for the schools, for the students, and we support them with resources. And this is an example of one of our resources. It's a poster. If you're a classroom teacher, this is like a C3 before me. Basically, it's designed to support the learners and their schools to troubleshoot potential problems by themselves. And the other part of what we do there is we monitor and we check in and sort of seek feedback regularly as to how people are going. And one of the things that we quite like about using a tool like Zoom is you've got that sort of overview, so you can kind of see what's going on, and it gives you a log and the ability to support people a lot. Our primary branch, we offer access to a wide range of learning areas. These are some of the ones currently. We've got our New Zealand specific ones, our international languages, our STEM subjects, various literacy and creative arts, and then various extension options. And this is a very responsive space. So it responds to what our students are and our schools are seeking at the time. you know, we need to get enough people for registrations and stuff, but we respond to the particular needs. And that's meant that it does tend to change over time. Sometimes it's driven by things like new curriculum. For example, when Aotearoa Histories came in, or digital tech, that meant that we had a particular interest in that. But basically, we just continue to respond to what particular needs are at the time. And this image is some of our students, I think, from Taupo, and they are enjoying their songwriting class. And secondary as well, our secondary students, this provides access to NCEA subjects that learners might not otherwise have. And it's through participation in our learning exchange. So Akonga access a wide range of NCEA subjects. And this level 1 health student's taking a subject that's not offered at her school. And it illustrates that a selection of the NCEA menu of opportunities that's available to learners via a secondary collaboration within the Virtual Learning Network. This is not every subject, but this is a range of them. And you can see as well that we've got learning pathways and progression in there, which is another aspect that we think is really important, and the possibility to interact between our primary and secondary. So we've got the option in primary for students to be extended by picking up some secondary ones. And similarly, just occasionally secondary might want to pick up one of the languages or something with us.
Thanks, Lucy. And we have had, since we've become year 0 to 13, we've had a lot more of this stuff going on, and particularly our secondaries are coming down to learn with our junior students. Something I want to share with you too, that's not programs as such, but projects that's been running through us for 12 years now. It's addresses the unique needs of our rural and remote schools. So it's really about providing social contact for students who are in isolated areas. So we work with a lot of the island schools, preparing them for when they have to leave their communities and go on to high school. It's been just as beneficial for their teachers, who are all sole charge teaching principals, as well, and provided them with really close professional network of colleagues. So these principals from Rakiura Stewart Island up to the Kaipara Harbour and back at Taranaki, they've been planning and teaching collaboratively together, and every 2 years they have a face-to-face camp in Wellington, which is the highlight. And so 12 years in, we're organising our 6th camp next year, and it still has a core group of principals who are really committed to keeping that kaupapa going. It's made a big difference. So we can work with schools on supporting projects as well as supporting programs of learning. And look, there's a range of benefits, and we see them in all of the schools and VLN who are working together. So the biggest thing overall is really about equity and access to the curricular opportunities that they previously didn't have. And for some schools, it's been a game changer. I talked before about turning around communities. It helps them maintain their viability. They're more resistant, and keep that engagement in their schools, because there is no excuse to send any kid down the road when they have everything they need in their own school, curriculum wise anyway. So this is a game changer for a lot of our schools, and why many of them are participating. Having said that, there's a lot of challenges. A lot of them are logistical, and of course what we're trying to do is quite different from what's happening in the school zone environment. So, trying to put something different into the very structured ways that school works and their siloed individual environments, of course, is going to bring some tensions along. But we work the best we can, and for our schools themselves, they do the best they can as well too. So we provide guidelines, support, and they all sign up to protocols of participation about what they need to do. Logistics aside, there's some gnarlier challenges for us, and they all sit in the education system and the lack of change in the education system that enables us to work in the way that we are trying to work with schools. Yes, sustainable funding is a biggie. We're thankful for the support we've had so far, but it's not sustainable and it's not enough. And there's no policy, until we have some clear policy directions coming from the government, from the Ministry of Education, then we will forever be sitting on the boundaries instead of at the centre where we can really get in and make a difference. So logistical challenges, we can work with those. Where there's a will, there's a way, and our schools really do have the will and they do find the way. A bigger challenges to us are systemic. So I just want to share a few slides with you on some work that we did together with the ministry. So they have worked with us a little bit more since COVID. This is a report that we did together with the VLN community about what the VLN model looks like in our schools. And so Lucy has shared you the nitty-gritty of what it looks like for Kotuiako VLN. I will just review some of the findings that come out of our report. You can all have access to the slides and all the links and research that come with that. So we focused on the pedagogies of our practice, and there were key things about the way we design learning, about the way we supported community and connectedness, and the way that we wrapped our mahi and our kaupapa around learners and what they needed. So our learning design is emergent. We don't just put a program up and expect kids to work through it themselves. We work them through together as a learning community, and we adapt our learning to suit the needs of the students who are coming to us. Yes, we start with an overview and a program, but we work with it flexibly and adaptively with that group of learners who are coming to us. So there's this continual process and cycle of feedback and feed forward and redesigning the program as we go. So how the asynchronous and synchronous environments work together is a key aspect to our model. Seeing our students face-to-face once a week in Zoom and communicating with each other on the shared platforms, which Lucy shared with you earlier. So they can work independently and they can work collaboratively in both of those environments, and they can initiate, particularly in our secondary learners, they can initiate some of that learning themselves. So the report goes into a lot more detail about how this looks different for primary and secondary, because the models are different across the two. Community and connectedness are really important, and the rural group was a good example of that. These students really need to be getting alongside other students their own age and getting a measure of themselves as a learner. And we know that learning is a social experience, so we bring our kids together to be part of that community of the classroom. If you're coming through Flange, you'll be well aware of what social presence is and how it's really needed for students to identify themselves in that online learning environment. The teachers themselves need to establish that sense of presence so that our kids know that it's safe community, that they can speak and share and engage with each other. And so that human factor is really important, and I think it always will be. It's not just about putting resources online. It's about being present. It's about being seen and engaging with our learners. So the synchronous sessions that we have are really an integral part of our model, and they provide that face-to-face connection with our learners. The other key part of our model is learner support. We're not keen to be gatekeeping students out of programs. We're encouraging students to be engaged in programs and being inclusive of all our learners, however they present to us. And so learner support is critical, not just the support that we have around them at school, but the support we can provide too. So it's a shared model of working together with the school-based support person, and Linda will recognise this person here from their school, who's in the secondary, we call them EDs, and recognising that some students will need more support than others. Some work done on this 2016. That Wally's not me, by the way, it's my husband, Rick, who worked with Elaine Koo at Waikato University. And his master's was around what does that learning support look like in our schools and what are the key components of it. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with it within your own organisations. One thing that really stands out for us in the schooling sector is the concept of tuakana taina, where our ākonga, our learners, are supporting each other in their learning journey and working together and not in isolation. That's a key part in growing the culture of learning online in a school, because you've always got these older ones coming through supporting the new ones, and the new ones coming through being keen as anything to be involved and having those tuakana role models who support them along the way. So a lot of what's important is what's in our learners themselves. So yes, we can put all the support systems in place, but we expect our learners to grow as part of that. And we know, as I said before, some need more support than others, but they grow through this process and developing the key competencies that are really important: contributing, managing self, participating. They're all really key ingredients in being successful in any learning, but especially in online learning. And we support the schools and the students to grow in that way. Assessment for learning, again, this is important as well. So the online environment provides the perfect means to do this, because technology enables us to engage in many different ways: written, video, audio. The possibilities are endless. And it also enables more visibility, should you choose to look into those online environments, and we can track and monitor progress in different ways. So it's not unusual to have greater levels of feedback and feed forward within an online environment that's highly connected than in many face-to-face classes. Now, one of my teachers said to me, who taught both face-to-face and online, said she felt a closer connection to her online students than she did to some of the students that were walking through the door of her physical classroom. And the final parts of this report looked at teacher capability, how important that is. You know, they are the oil from which we run. So the teachers who work with us are from throughout New Zealand. In the secondary, mostly these teachers are employed by our member schools and teach in reciprocity across the schooling network. So they're in physical schools, but some of them are not, and they engage directly by our organisation and employed by us. So we became a registered educational setting with a Teachers Council, so that we could run professional growth cycle with our teachers and attest for their renewal of their registration. This was really important for us to maintain the professional integrity of online teaching in the schooling sector, and show that it was a thing and a valued thing, not just about the quality, but our professional integrity as well. So when teachers first come into the space, it's really challenging. There's a lot to learn, from the pedagogies to the environments to the communications and the technologies. It's not something that they all use in a day-to-day way in their own schools. They have to be resilient and have positive attitudes and really be able to work through the challenges. So the other thing, and I talked about it before, tuakana taina embraces the concept of ako that we also learn alongside our students, and that helps build our relationships. So building teacher capability, really important, and Lucy will go into more detail on that shortly.
Thank you. So we have a number of ways that we support our teachers as they get to be learning, to teach online. As Rachel says, they often say, hey, it is like being a beginning teacher again. And one framework that we've sometimes used to describe this, that I know many people from this audience will be familiar with, is the TPAC one, where the teachers were explaining to them, hey, you already know your subject, the content knowledge here. and how to teach it, but you're having to put this other overlayer of, how to use the digital technology in meaningful ways to teach it. And, so that's really for the teachers, it's a whole other level of mahi that they're having to put on top of what they're already doing. And we do various inductions and conversations, which always involve the words plan B, etc. And we've also got, coming up on our next slide, another avenue that we do to build our teacher capability is we're part of a teacher network of expertise. So again, this is funded. The ministry supports this, and the Kōtuitui online teacher network supports our online primary and secondary schools, and also any other teaching colleagues that are interested in the online space. And it's fantastic because it provides us an opportunity to collaborate and share our expertise and to build networks in the online and face-to-face. So we have face-to-face hui regularly and also online. And this year we began with sessions targeted to start new teachers at the start of the year. We have specialist subject groups and we collaborate with our teachers in other groups, for example, blending languages and online practice. And it's far more than just using the tools, although that's a really important component. It's the sort of unique online pedagogy and the ongoing new opportunities that the online environment enables, to collaborate and work together. And some of our recent sessions, we're very privileged to have a Kaiarahi Mātauranga Māori, Tiwai, who contributes to our Kōtuiaku leadership team to work with our kura and our kaiako that need support. And she's recently, she's about to be running for us Matariki Ahunganui, where we're going to be finding out ways that we can support our classes and learners as they prepare for Matariki. We've also had really popular sessions on AI and how it particularly affects the assessment opportunities, particularly for our secondary colleagues. As you'll know, in the tertiary, all of you in the tertiary space, it's a topic of great interest at the moment, and there was a lot of really rich discussion. We are scheduling some stuff for our online language teachers to collaborate with other language teachers, and just all of the particular unique features and opportunities there. And another session that we've had, or sessions that we've often run, which is a popular area, is many different ways that you can increase interaction. But essentially our sessions respond to the professional growth needs of the staff at the time and our staff feedback. So we have a regular staff professional growth cycle. As Rachel was covering before, possibly we attest our teachers. Our teachers are registered teachers. They're from all around Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we can support their registration. And part of that is we have a professional growth process, and we provide professional learning on particular needs of staff. Essentially, it's a space that continues to change, and Rachel and I are going to be speaking about our evolving practice in the online teacher professional development area in a practice paper at the conference in August, and we invite you to attend if you're interested.
Thanks, Lucy. A couple of things I just wanted to touch on before we go into wrap up and give you some time if you wanted to ask any questions. Is yes, COVID, people keep talking about COVID a lot, and yes, it was had quite an impact on our schools. But we felt that schools who worked with us were much more resilient during times of COVID. The feedback we had for them about how well they felt prepared, how they managed during lockdown and teaching learning online came through quite strongly. And when you have access to these slides, you can go and read some of what those teachers had to say. Lucy and I wrote about it at the time as well, and those links will be at the end of this presentation. But it's not just about COVID or emergency situations such as Cyclone Gabriel. Every day teachers, schools face disruptions because of teacher shortages. They could lose a member of key staff, they're unable to attract specialist staff, and on occasions we've supported secondary schools who just don't have a teacher and been able to put a teacher in there and support them virtually. So teaching in a time of change, teaching in COVID was really challenging around the emergency response that came through that was not really aligned to the quality practice that we've been working on for the last more than 25 years. But I strongly believe getting more schools involved will just help grow that capacity in the schooling network for future resilience. Another aspect of what we do that came through really strongly and was supported in the last couple of years with a little bit of money from the ministry was looking at our smallest schools. How can we support those who need it the most? There's nothing worse than hearing from a school who says, oh, look, they can't afford to participate next year because their school roll has dropped and their funding has dropped. And that really goes against the grain of what we are here for. So we were able to access some funding in the last couple of years that we can support the very small year 1 to 3. So I'm talking about anywhere there's a principal who's actually teaching to come into these, to come into our classes, and we seconded Principal Kath Johnson for a week to do an evaluative report around that, and this is what she had to say, or she said the principals had to say, and yeah, so that was a really important bit of our work in the last year as well. Okay, and just wrapping up, and again, we'll provide the slides for you. Here are the links to most of the things we've talked about. There is also a research base that sits there in the middle, which is a repository of all the research that we've been involved in or know about around online and virtual learning in the New Zealand schooling sector. So we're really keen to connect with others, to explore other collaborative initiatives and ways that we can work together or support things. We're really interested in further research. And another area that I'm really interested, when we talked about how difficult it was for teachers to make that change to be fully online, is that I would like to see a future where any teacher can teach both face-to-face and online without batting an eyelid, really. And I think there's a lot of work to do to prepare teachers of our future teachers to be comfortable, whatever their learning environment, whether it's face-to-face, online, or blended. So we're really keen to look at how we could work with ITE around that. So just reaching out there. And finally, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, we've got examples of students' learnings there. We've got case studies from some of our schools, the link to the research, and any other way you might want to connect to us. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Rachel and Lucy. That's really interesting. Any questions from the floor or any comments or any thoughts that you would like to share? Yes, Andrew. You are muted.
Yeah, I was the person responsible for the Rural Secondary School Support Scheme for all of Queensland, where we spent a lot of time doing all the things that you've talked about and facing all the difficulties that you encounter, not only in the rural sector, but also supporting big schools where timetable clashes didn't allow students. Listening to your talk and becoming concerned with the fragility, partly brought about by the way New Zealand organises its schools, to what extent, and you probably can't answer this, would it be beneficial to work more closely with Te Kura as a support or funding mechanism? Because that's where we operated out of, was the schools of distance education in Queensland, to make sure that we had the staff, the money and the resources.
Well, I guess, Andrew, the VLN came about as an alternative to Te Kura back in those early days. There's no reason why we couldn't work with them together, but I guess we have a unique position in the sector, and they do as well. But we have a lot of cross points as well too about especially about how our teachers could work together, perhaps through the Ko Tui Tui network of expertise. Yeah, so the virtual learning networks were set up to be something that the schools did for each other, if that makes sense.
It does, and one of the things that I, in the end, of course, had to do something about was preparing teachers from regular schools to work in rural secondary schools. And I wrote a book which became a textbook about that. But more importantly, it was developing teacher skills so that they could function both in the online environment and in regular classrooms, because they were subject at the end of the day to transfer from one sort of system to the other, or work in both.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get into a seminar with some people over in Europe, and the Welsh presented, and they presented, wow, just pretty much what we were doing. I thought it was really fascinating that it's not any one person's idea. It just makes sense in different contexts to be working in this way. And I was really excited to see that the same sort of networks were being set up and running through Wales. And they had similar focuses in supporting Indigenous languages and supporting resourcing across small schools.
Yeah. Highlands and Islands project running out of the University of Aberdeen and the Scottish Ministry of Education face the same problems, teaching kids on remote places in Scotland and on the islands.
And like Rachel mentioned, the opportunity to potentially contribute in the initial teacher education area is quite an interest, because I think, as you identified, there's a bit of a gap, you know, it's something that people need.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Not that we want to put more on ITE, because I think people put on ITE.
Busy space. Yeah.
The same as a way that the sector puts everything on schools to do everything for everybody. But you know, as a space I'd be interested in working with. Yeah.
Rachel, later on, after this is over, if there's anything I can do to help, do let me know. I'm still a registered teacher, even though I'm ancient and retired.
Well, I'm not saying you're ancient, but one of our teachers had her 80th birthday on the weekend, Andrew.
Well done to her.
So age is no barrier. In fact, equal opportunities is much easier to address in the virtual space.
Yes.
Because nobody needs to get on the floor with young learners or run around school in the same sort of way.
There's a great question in the chat here that's come through from Gloria, asking what could be done better if the resources were available. And I know that you started to allude to that when we talked about last year with the increased funding, and we made a lot of stuff available to our small schools. And what it showed was that, you know, cost was a barrier for them. When that barrier was reduced, we had a great uptake.
Yeah, improving access, probably the biggest thing, because schools have to contribute to be able to access. Better systems. We were really challenged by the cost of platforms that we could do more with. So look, really running on smell of an oily rag. So, you know, more resourcing available would improve access for our learners and provide better systems, and therefore better systems support for their learning as well.
And all the things that you can do to reduce, you know, the digital divide and inequity. I mean, there's been a lot of progress in that, but we're still, you know, some of our rural places, we have to design around the fact that they have limited Wi-Fi connections, or, you know, some of the students in my class might have older devices or whatever. And these are all things that you have to work around that are forming barriers for those people.
Yes, it's a major issue. I remember sending computers out to people in very remote places and getting polite letters back saying, can we have electricity to go with them, please?
Yeah.
No, there's been a lot of good progress, but there's still gaps when the, you know, in the question if resources are available.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Gloria. I was just going to say, Rachel and Lucy, you say you are very interested to do some more research in this space, and we do have a portfolio at the AZ. It's called Research Portfolio, so feel free to be in touch, and maybe Flexible Learning Association and yourself can do something together, because definitely this is something quite timely and significant for the future of education. Gloria said, I can imagine that there will be so many differences in resources per school and regions. Yeah, I guess the variables and factors can be varied. And yeah, anything else? Any question from other people? No? Any final remarks, Rachel and Lucy?
I'm just saying hi to Lorraine. I can see down there. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, Rachel. That was fascinating, guys, and actually took me down memory lane, all that work way back when in virtual learning networks.
Yeah, and the more things change, the more they stay the same as well.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
But fascinating, guys, as always. You're doing an awesome job.
Kia ora.
Yeah. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Cool. So thanks, Rachel and Lucy, for sharing this very important and significant piece of work for schooling in New Zealand. On behalf of FLUNT, thanks again for your time and effort to organize this webinar. The recording will be available online soon. So watch the space and we are going to distribute it to our social media platforms so that we can reach out to more people. So thank you for those who are joining us today as well. Look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. And thanks again, Rachel and Lucy.
Yeah, while I'll share the slides with you, you can send them on to those who registered. Just tidy them up and send them on. There's a lot of links in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Normally we tidy out the recording before we release it. So they will be good with the slides attached to the recording.
Yeah. Thanks, Linda. Thanks for coming in as well. Kia ora.
Thank you, everyone. Kia ora. Bye.